All right, Justin, it seems that supply chains have not been, how do we say this, all fixed overnight, evidently, and we have the latest data from Auto Forecast Solutions, thanks to Automotive News. The headline reads, cuts could be worse than reported. More than 3 million vehicles have been axed from automakers' production schedules worldwide so far this year because of the microchip shortage, but that could be an undercount. Justin, when it comes to electric vehicles, we know that some of the biggest challenges and hurdles they face, aside from the fact that we don't have the charging infrastructure, the prices are ridiculously high, building them is becoming even more of a challenge, whether it's the raw materials, the semiconductors and chips needed for them. You read a headline like this in Automotive News, you pair it with some of the news headlines you're hearing about the droughts and power shortages in China. Let's do a lay of the land. What's going on in EV world in terms of supply? It doesn't look so pretty.
Yeah, what struck me when I saw the headline from Automotive News was that they're saying it's worse than they thought. Well, I'm here to say that it's even worse than they thought. So it's worse than they thought that
it's even worse than they thought that they thought.
Yes, precisely. So the latest news out of China is really, really something to watch for the next few months and beyond. They've had a heat wave with temperatures up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Celsius for those of you outside of the wonderful US of A. And what that has done has really exhausted their hydroelectric power in China, which when the water evaporates, you've got nothing to spin the turbines that generate their electricity, especially in Sichuan province in southwestern China. Sichuan province happens to be home to a lot of automotive suppliers. It doesn't just affect EVs, but it's going to affect EVs particularly hard because, Zach, you and I know that EVs require far more semiconductor chips than the average combustion vehicle. I mean, in Sichuan, you've got producers such as Foxconn, battery makers such as CATL. You even have Toyota factories located there that are all shut down right now. They've been shut down for the past 7 days because the government is saying, hey, we don't have enough electricity to keep all of these factories open. In fact, 16,000 companies have been forced to shutter in Sichuan. It's going to be months before we feel the direct impacts of this particular shutdown, but I'm getting kind of nervous about what's to come for especially Japanese and Korean automakers.
And we've had executives of EV automakers come out and explicitly say there's going to be a raw material shortage in the future. My question to you, Justin, what is the weakest part of the EV supply chain? What do you think it is? Is it the raw materials? Is it the chips? Is it something else that we're not thinking about?
It's the raw materials specifically because I mean, this was even before the Inflation Reduction Act brought these raw materials sourcing requirements into the incentive, into the eligibility requirements. Even before that, you've got to make sure that you have enough ethically and environmentally sourced lithium, sometimes cobalt. You've got a whole number of rare earth metals and just even things like iron and aluminum that you need for not only battery production, but other facets of the vehicle as well. That is definitely where you've got the weakness because right now you've got 51% of the world's lithium mines in China. A bunch of it's also down in Chile and Australia. What do all three of those places have in common? They are very far away from the United States. So, I mean, thinking specifically about American EV production and the next years ahead, that's where our greatest weakness lies, is where are you going to get the raw materials needed for these EVs?
Looking for a car? Look no further than join YAA.com. Go check out the cars listed there. There's no BS, no lead gen forms, no anything. Just cars.
All right, and we already know that EV inventory is incredibly low. The average transaction price last month was still around $66,000 for a new electric vehicle. So this is obviously going to continue to prohibit EVs becoming more affordable for consumers anytime soon.
Yes, for sure. And I must mention that Tesla, 66% of EV buyers in America still choose a Tesla. Tesla's been hit particularly hard by this Sichuan shutdown. Giga Shanghai, they rely on 16 suppliers that are all the way on the other side of China in Sichuan. The government of Shanghai did something controversial this week and asked the government of Sichuan if they could maybe prioritize those 16 suppliers so that Tesla would not have to shut down. And the Sichuan government said, no, that's kind of messed up because, I mean, their people are without air conditioning right now. So at least they've got the guts to say, hey, we're not going to prioritize Tesla over our people. But this just goes to highlight that Tesla's been hit pretty hard because of how deeply they rely on suppliers from that region. I even heard reports that superchargers throughout parts of southwestern China are just out of order, not working. They have no power because of rolling blackouts continuing. So I guess the only way to foolproof EV ownership is to have solar plus battery storage. I don't know. It's a wild word out there.
You just brought up a really interesting point that I've literally never thought of. What if there's like a natural disaster and we can't get power to the power grid for a particular area? How do you drive your car?
Well, I must also
mention, we
mention,
can save that for another
video. I got a counterpoint, Zach, which it's
hard
to get the gas stations to work too under similar scenarios. So it's a problem, but gas stations are also going to be a problem in that scenario.
Definitely, that's 100% true. All right, so Tesla's being hit hard. You mentioned Toyota has factories in that area as well. Are there any other name brand automakers that we would know that are going to be affected by this, or is it all just suppliers that we should be worrying about right now?
Yeah, so I dug into where some of the Japanese and Korean automakers source their different supplies from, most notably semiconductors. And it looks like, strictly EV speaking, the Nissan Ariya, Toyota BZ4X, even the Ioniq 5 and Kia EV6, they are going to be hit pretty hard by this shutdown. All of the cars we've just spoken about, they've already had limited production because of supply chain issues, so it's just going to get worse, it looks like, in 2023. I mean, if this gets bad enough, we could even see this affecting the rollout of some new models, like the Hyundai Ioniq 6, the Kia EV9, can't keep track of all these numbers. They've also got an EV7 coming out pretty soon. Yeah, so many iterations. But in other 2023 arrivals, they could be impacted by this breaking news, which is all based on a Chinese drought.
Yeah, something tells me that over the next couple of years, we're going to be making a lot of videos about different natural disasters that happen that ultimately impact supply chains, because although the Inflation Reduction Act is essentially just a push to have domestic manufacturing of batteries and battery components, we're still going to be really reliant on other countries in the meantime. And when things like this happen, I mean, you literally hear and see corporations trying to lobby local governments to get, access to materials more quickly, or access to, in this case, power more quickly. It's going to have ramifications nationwide and globally. We'll keep our pulse on this story, obviously share more as we learn it as well.
Yeah, we'll see what happens next. I mean, as I was looking into this, I was trying to find a silver lining, right? Like, what can we do about it? And largely the answer that I found is just wait it out and hope for the best, because although the federal government President Biden, he just signed the new semiconductor bill into law. It's going to take 3 to 5 years for that to result in any meaningful increase in domestic semiconductor chip production. So, Zach, we'll have to see what happens, but it's going to be a while before we see this situation really improving domestically.
Tune back in August of 2026 to see what happened.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, Justin. See ya.